What a day. The results are in and Theresa May is still Prime Minister, but only by the skin. In all the excitement, that stream just cut out. But in case you didn't hear my first sentence, the results are in. Theresa May is still the Prime Minister, but only by the skin of her teeth. 200 Tory MPs have voted in favour of May and 117 against. James, your instant reaction, what does this mean?
It's a really, really bad night for her, and it was always going to be a bad night for her because there frankly is no good route for her now out of this. Headline figures, that is way more voting against her than just the members of the European Research Group, which has 48 members. It's also quite a substantial chunk of the non-payroll Tory MPs, so those that aren't, don't receive emoluments or support from the government. So, cabinet members, ministers, people involved in government, vice chairs, envoys, stuff like that. So that's a really substantial chunk of her people voting against her. And importantly, that means that, yes, nothing has changed. It's an old May favourite catchphrase, and nothing has changed because she's not getting a deal through Parliament anytime soon. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that. But she now goes into, having made this commitment to her MPs that she won't fight the next election, she is now a lame duck Prime Minister, and she's now going to see her authority ebb away.
And what does it mean if her authority is ebbing away? I mean, she's now safe for 12 months, right? So in a way, she's in a stronger position than she was before.
Yeah, except for the fact that when Prime Ministers, and this is true across the board, it's true in both parties, when Prime Ministers say, I'm going to go by this time, I'm going to go at some point within the next year, the only question that people then begin asking is when. When are you going? When are you going to go? She didn't give a guarantee on that this evening, but it is now going to be a subject for much kind of fractious Tory infighting. If you thought the knives were out for each other ahead of this vote, they're going to be far sharper afterwards.
All right, let's take a step back and go through the key events of the day. Of course, it feels like a very long day. I almost had to be reminded that this vote was called this morning.
Yeah, and quite late this morning. I mean, obviously there were rumours last night, beginning to be stood up last night, that the 48 letters were into Sir Graham Brady, chair of the 1922 committee. Those rumours were circulating last night. He'd popped into Downing Street to see her, to say it's coming, and then we got the announcement this morning. But quite late this morning, when I woke up about 6:30 this morning, there was the sense in the morning news that this was coming, but the announcement hadn't been made yet. So you got the announcement from Graham Brady, in charge of the backbenchers, saying this is coming, and then it was organised immediately. It was organised the same day. That is one reason I think that the rebellion was, smaller than it perhaps could have been, because, so the Tory rules say that when you hold a vote of no confidence, it has to be carried out promptly. Doesn't say same day. Mm-hmm. And what this has meant is that members, MPs, have been insulated from, the sort of frothing headbangers at the Tory roots, the grassroots. Grassroots of Tories often close to sort of pushing up over a grave, really. But yeah, so they've been cut off from their members in that sense. This is also cut off manoeuvre time for the European Research Group. May then comes out and gives her speech this morning outside Number 10, where she delivers this kind of, very standard Theresa May speech now, which is, I am going to fight, I am going to win, blah, 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 whatever. Ends it with a kind of really, really nakedly political, if you don't back me, you will get Corbyn and McDonnell. Really really trying to light a fire.
Which unfortunately is the same line the BBC have taken whenever they cover this, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's been really odd through the course of the day actually watching the coverage, not just on the BBC actually. You know, the BBC is bad for it, but it's true elsewhere. The BBC have gone on to, you know, to do this like, gosh, isn't she so brave? Isn't she so resilient? Isn't she so tough? Doesn't she endure so well? Doesn't she have guts? You think, oh God, some depth to the reporting, please. But that's been repeated across the board. You know, oh God, you've got to respect her tenacity. I don't respect her tenacity. Anyway, so there's that. So and then we had PMQs. Remember that also happened today. Big fight there between Corbyn and May.
Which was more over the deal than about the no confidence vote.
Yeah, right. Because of course it's very awkward for Corbyn to bring up matters of party confidence in the House of Commons. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about other forms of confidence motion as we go on. But yes, so PMQs happened. Now, then there was this committee meeting this evening. So this is the meeting of the 1922 committee, which is the kind of powerful backbench Tory body that runs this stuff. May comes in, makes a speech. In that speech, she gives this concession. She says, you know, I want to, but I understand that you do not want me to lead you into the next election. It's such a key concession from her, and it effectively hobbles her for the rest of her ministry. But the other thing, she must have said some other stuff in there as well. She seems to have given off the idea that there is some sort of legally binding solution to the backstop coming. That, you know, and this is something that Liz Truss has been, you know, Liz Truss.
So we can go through I wanted to go through the 3 desperate measures that the Tories had to take, considering they weren't that confident about winning this. So one, she pretty much had to lie. So can we get that first tweet up? So this is Liz Truss saying that she told the 1922 committee, the meeting of the Tory MPs, that she would get a legal guarantee that the backstop would be temporary. The backstop, of course, it's part of the deal that means that whether or not we have a free trade agreement with the EU, there will definitely be a soft border on the island of Ireland, because Northern Ireland will stay basically in the single market and the customs union, while the whole of Britain will stay in the customs union. So the whole point is that this guarantees absolutely forever to the Republic of Ireland, obviously still a member of the EU, that the Good Friday Agreement won't be broken. The whole point of that is it can't be temporary. So Liz Truss is either misquoting Theresa May, to be honest, that's quite possible.
Yeah,
or Theresa May is hoping that her backbenchers are kind of stupid, which is also quite possible. We can go to the next desperate measure. This one's pretty appalling. So they had to reinstate 2 MPs who were under investigation for sex offences. So they definitely weren't reinstated because just by coincidence, the Tory disciplinary channels had decided that I think one of them had sent about 2,000 sexts to a constituent, and the other is under investigation by the police for allegations of serious sexual offences. The final one, slightly more amusing than the last 2, is inventing children from the 1950s deep south. So Claire Perry to garner some real support, some real momentum behind Theresa May. She tweeted, "Just as the family wakes up, holy mackerel, good luck with your vote, mama. I'm rooting for your big dog, Theresa." This is apparently her child. I mean, I think if you're raising your child in 2018 in the UK, if they speak like that, there should be an investigation for abuse, right? Because I mean, that kid's going to go outside and he's going to get seriously bullied.
I think the children of any Tory MP will be seriously bullied.
No, because they go to schools with other children.
Oh,
of Tory
yes,
MPs.
no, that's true. Oh, yeah.
All right, that was the day that was.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the other thing to say here, I guess, in terms of historical context is, look, this is, comparatively, and again, it's a slightly different system back when there was a last challenge against a sitting PM via a vote of no confidence from within the Tory party. That would be against Thatcher. There were 2, 1989 and 1990. May, this is she's won this, 63.1%, I think is the figure. And Thatcher 1989, so that was the first challenge against her leadership, just at the point where she was introducing the poll tax. She got 84%, and she was gone a year later after a second attack. So yeah, no, I mean, I think this is a very, very poor showing for her, and you know, it doesn't strengthen her hand at all. It is worth noting that Thatcher was weakened even by surviving so strongly that first confidence vote against her. So that to me is really, really important to remember. She's pretty screwed, to be honest. So yeah, other than the sort of nauseating commentary about her boldness, like strange fictional children, the utter cynicism of greasing in some rather unpleasant former Tory whip holders. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty gross. The detail I like from the committee is something that Tim Shipman tweeted out saying that while Theresa May was delivering her speech, ministers were crying. It's a wonderful thought.
Difficult time for them, isn't it?
I don't care.
We're going to move on to speculation, what's going to happen next, what this means. But first of all, there are 865 of you watching this live, which is excellent for an emergency unplanned Tisky Sour. But we want to get these numbers up, so please like this video, please share this video. And this is important, actually. Make sure you subscribe to the Novara Media YouTube channel so that you get notifications every time we go live. Of course,
I suppose I should do that,
when the general election gets called and it doesn't look like this government is assured to survive much longer, so that could happen soon. We want to be doing these shows every night. To expand our operations, we need more money. So please go to support.novaramedia.com. As you know, we are asking for the equivalent of 1 hour's wage so we can continue working around the clock, especially in tumultuous times like this one. Thank you if you already donate. You are what makes this possible. Okay, James, what does this mean? What's going to happen next?
Yeah, well, okay. So I think the first thing how we figure out what happens next is remember why this happened in the first place, right? So she's had a rebellious backbench for some time. They don't like the way things have been going with the withdrawal agreement. But really, so this is primarily from the European Research Group, who do not, by the way, produce any research. It's a completely fictitious organisation. Anyway, these are basically hardcore pro-Brexit, you know, orbiting Planet Hayek somewhere, you know, really out there people. They hate the EU, you know, and you know their kind of mascot is the honourable member for the 18th century, Jacob Rees-Mogg. But so they've been aggravated by you know this whole kerfuffle. Obviously, she, despite having been very, very clear to her, and we found out that it was very clear to her after she'd pulled the vote, that there was no way that this agreement was going to pass Parliament. She sent ministers out on the radio every morning to say this vote is going to happen, including on the morning that she pulled the vote itself. So this is a woman who is not just duplicitous to the entire House, she's duplicitous to her own ministers. And so no wonder there's some ill feeling towards her as well. So they've pulled this vote. This is the vote, you know, to try and ratify the so-called meaningful vote, to kind of get Parliament's stamp of approval on the withdrawal agreement. She has made an undertaking, you know, that she's definitely going to bring this to a vote at some point. But now she's off to Brussels tomorrow to try and extract some compromises, you know, from the EU to make it more palatable. But yeah, no. So this is where it has kicked off. Really, is that they don't like how she's treated them. They don't like how she's treated the process. They don't like the way in which she's effectively nuked their relationship with the Democratic Unionist Party. Those are the people who continue to keep her in power, and that is a very, very important relationship for them. And that relationship is still in tatters. So yeah, so that's where it comes from. So now she's off to Brussels. She's going to say, you know, give me something I can use for these people. Give me something to grease the passage, some sugar to make the medicine.
Grease the passage. Is that a phrase, or did you just make that
yes,
up?
It's a phrase.
I like that
it's
one.
A phrase. It's a phrase. It's something more of a double entendre than I intended. But yeah, anyway, so she's going to ask them for something. They're going to say effectively no, but we can try and find something that sounds good. whenever she brings it back to Parliament, it's still going nowhere. There's still no way that the European Research Group is going to vote for it. There's no way that the Labour Party is going to vote for it. And there is no way that the DUP is going to vote for it. So, this, you know, as it stands, the agreement is going nowhere. The parliamentary arithmetic has not changed. She is, however, in a bit of a better position vis-a-vis her own party. Because, as you were suggesting, she is now immune from motions from within her party. So these are internal Tory party votes of confidence, i.e. within the party structure, about her status as party leader. She now cannot be challenged for a whole year. So she's immune. They can't bring another motion of confidence against her. That maybe gives her some broader latitude within Parliament to ignore the Rees-Moggs of the world. But nonetheless, she will not be looking at this result tonight and feel empowered by it. She's going to feel a lot lonelier and probably cut rather a sadder figure in Parliament, and I'm all for that.
So to me, there are three genuine options. So the official story, which I think is dead in the water, is that she's going to go to the EU. The deal is still alive, but she's going to get some tweaks or some clarifications, which means she can bring it back to Parliament and ultimately it will pass. I think because we know if her red lines stay the same, what the EU offer will be so superficial that given so many MPs have staked political capital on trashing this deal, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to say, oh, look, we've changed her mind because she's got this reassurance from Juncker. I think that's very unlikely. So what seems the plausible scenarios is, one, she uses this opportunity of saying, look, I can sideline the ERG now. So the ERG, you've already introduced in the European, we don't actually do research group. She can sideline those and try and sort of make a softer deal. So she can go back and just say, look, I'm going to completely change my red lines. Let's do something that looks more like the single market and try and peel off Labour backbenchers and sort of create a soft Brexit majority in Parliament. I mean, the ERG will be very pissed off about this. It could tear the Tory party apart. But as we know, even when backbenchers hate what the government is doing or what the shadow cabinet are doing, they tend to stay in those parties because the alternative is worse. So that could happen. That's one option. The other is she sticks with this deal, which can't get through Parliament, but she takes it to a people's vote. So the people's vote would be against her soft Brexit deal versus Remain. I can't see no deal being on the ballot because I think that would be too much of a risk, and I don't think business would let her do that. And I think she could also pass through Parliament probably a people's vote with her deal versus Remain. And the other is that she calls a general election. She says, look, this is not feasible. I need a new Parliament. I need new people in the Houses of Parliament who can pass something I want to. Do you think, is there another option, or are those three?
I think that's true. I think that's true. So, I mean, let's take the... I mean, I suppose the other one is that she puts this agreement as it is to a vote, and then she relies on, what I call tarping. So this is a phrase... So the vote fails. It doesn't go through the first time. And this happened with... in the American legislature after the global financial crisis of 2008, you had a package called TARP, for short, rather unlovely word, Troubled Asset Relief Program. And so this was effectively like a massive bailout directly to sort of failing financial institutions. Didn't get past the first time. Markets went crazy. Came back, and legislators, cowed by market tantrums, passed it through the next time. That could be one option for her, and it has been suggested that is one of the things that she's thinking. It's been suggested, a couple of months ago, that's that she feels that there might be a market reaction such as to change legislators' minds. I actually don't think that's very likely, and I think it's probably less likely after this. So to take your other suggestions. That she attempts to pass it fails, and then she attempts to legislate for a people's vote. Yes, that's interesting. Certainly a possibility. There are lots of people who'd be very uncomfortable with the prospect of a people's vote. There is also the question about the form of the question. And actually that will be a really substantial parliamentary struggle, because the Labour Party could say quite rightly, well, as the Council of Presidents said today, this is the only deal possible with the UK's red lines as they are. The Labour Party does not have the same red lines as Theresa May. So they could say, well, we should have an extend Article 50 and reopen negotiations.
Oh, yeah.
So the parliamentary push and pull on the referendum question would be really substantial. That then has to go to the Electoral Commission for testing for intelligibility and certification. That's a process.
I think they can override that shit. I mean, if Syriza could call a referendum, the Oki vote, in a week, I mean, why is it going to take us 3 months? We just legislate to say that body doesn't actually matter that much, and we're just going to decide the vote here and now.
Yes, you
Or
could
we're gonna
change.
decide the question here and now,
You could amend the Referendum Act 2006 to do that. Parliament is sovereign; it can do that whenever it wanted. There would be then a serious question of legitimacy about the referendum. The Electoral Commission is a non-political body that determines the nature of whether a referendum is politically legitimate. So there's no easy political way through that. So that's one of those scenarios. Possibility of people's vote. I think a people's vote is more likely tonight than it has been. What are our other options? What was your other scenario?
Well, the other
peel off some Labour. Yeah,
do a sort of national government vibe and go for a single market
stealth.
deal.
Yeah, no. So this is a very, 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 very interesting idea that she, now being freed of the headbangers of her backbenchers, can look around Parliament and say, well, actually, I am now safe for a year. I don't want to be PM for more than a year, frankly, anyway.
And the ERG people are never going to vote for any deal she comes up with, so she might as well now just dismiss all of their concerns.
So those concerns are no longer relevant to her. So why not avoid the problem of the backstop by including Northern Ireland in a full customs union, single market type deal, softest of soft Brexits, peel off the rather jelly-spined members of the PLP to vote with her, probably pull Caroline Lucas in too, probably pull most of the Liberal Democrats in as well.
She couldn't do that. Again, I think that the problem for her with that's why I don't actually see this sort of like national unity.
Yeah, no. I don't think this will happen.
Okay.
I don't think this will happen because her cabinet would collapse.
Well, I don't think it will happen because just as the thing with TARP, right? So when that went to that was basically the bank bailout, right? So it's saying we're going to, that's what asset relief. So we're going to give the banks money for all these mortgages that aren't going to pay them, all these people with mortgages who aren't going to pay them. That all happened within a period of sort of like 14 days. So parliamentarians there, what are they called, congressmen there, were really bumped into it. Whereas because this has been stretched over a 6-month period, so many MPs have said, single market, that's complete crap. The only thing that's good is Remain. We want a people's vote. So many MPs have said this current deal, even with tweaks, is crap. I'll never vote for it. That it's much harder for people to change their minds.
I think that changes as we bear down on the deadline. I think she can wait a while to put this into action. And so I think those calculations change as we come closer and closer to the deadline. But I agree with you. I think it will be very hard. And I also, as I was saying, she will face enormous problems just in keeping a government together. It would make the cabinet resignations the last, little while look minor, because that would be a real problem for many of the people there. So that looks unlikely. General election, she doesn't want one. I mean, that's it. She doesn't want one. I mean, it may end up as the only way she can eventually slice the Gordian knot, perhaps. But
she'd do a people's vote before she did a general election.
She would do a people's vote before she did a general election. So then the question of the Labour Party comes into play.
Yeah, let's talk about opposition strategy. It's like you can read my mind, James.
Yeah, well.
That's where the Labour Party comes into play. There's been many calls earlier on this week for Labour to call a vote of no confidence. Demands from Caroline Lucas, demands from the Labour backbenchers, demands from woke Subri, even though she's going to vote against it if Labour call it. Emily Maitlis still calling her the real opposition.
Yeah, it was quite
completely bizarre.
Actually.
Were Labour correct not to do that? And does this vote today change the parliamentary arithmetic? Should they call one tomorrow?
Yeah. So let's deal with those two questions separately. It was absolute fucking folly for these people to come out and say, oh, Labour must call a vote of no confidence in May now. So i.e. yesterday. This would have been the only thing that would have stuck superglue in the fractures of the Conservative Party. We would not have gotten this result tonight. Those letters would not have gone in yesterday, and we would, her hand would no longer be, she has been revealed as unable, utterly unable to govern her own party, let alone the country. That is really, really crucial. It's really, really affected her political capital. It's really, really important. Had Labour put in a motion yesterday for that, you would have had the entire Tory party, including everyone's favourite, fraud and hypocrite Anna Soubry, coming in and saying, I back the Prime Minister against, the dastardly socialist schemes of the Labour Party. That is what would have happened. So, absolutely, these people have the political acuity of boiled ham. Do not listen to them.
I know. I just actually, before we get on to what should happen next, I know we complain a lot about the media, but this was ridiculous because the BBC took this demand for Jeremy Corbyn to call a pointless no confidence vote so seriously. Last night on Newsnight, Kirsty Walk introduced the show by saying that SNP have given Jeremy Corbyn until midnight to call a vote of no confidence. It's like, what's their leverage? What happens at midnight? She didn't explain that, and that wasn't what the SNP said. That was the neutral presenter of the BBC speaking as if that was a reasonable thing to say.
I mean, what were they going to do? Throw a tantrum? Wow. Okay. So there is that, but it's worth remembering why these people did this. They did not do it because they thought there was any chance of there being a successful vote of no confidence. They said pretty explicitly, and this is including from Ian Murray, a Labour MP, effectively trying to slither his way around policy conference. The policy of the Labour Party has decided, as I understand it, after some rather fraught compositing sessions at conference, is to seek a general election first. Now, what Murray and his, crew of I can't say that because I'll be disciplined by the party. Anyway, what Murray and his crew of People's Vote enthusiasts are essentially saying,
one of my favourite euphemisms,
are essentially saying is we want to have discharged our obligation to look like we have tried to get a general election so we can proceed to a people's vote. That thus allows us to avoid, the possibility of Jeremy Corbyn government, which is horrifying for many of these people. But it also allows us to proceed to, with our preferred political direction until we've at least performed some semblance of trying to get a GE. And we won't get one. To me, that goes against the spirit of that conference resolution, actually. The clear intention
was to genuinely try
to
get a general election,
and seek a general election. If you are not genuinely trying, which includes genuinely understanding parliamentary strategy and how this might work, then you're not trying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question of when and if Labour should now put a confidence motion is an interesting one. To my mind, the best thing to do is to lay it immediately after her withdrawal agreement fails to go through.
Why?
Because at that point, you have probably a situation in which the DUP have said they will back her in terms of confidence until the meaningful vote, and the DUP are the key element here. Mm-hmm. If a vote of confidence were moved and the DUP were to vote with the government would be fine. If the DUP were to abstain, that is quite a different scenario. If the DUP were to abstain, or preferably to vote, to vote against the government, we would see likely a situation in which you have depending on the wording of the motion, this is where things get a little bit complex. If it's a motion under the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, you would get the triggering of the 14-day period. Mm-hmm. We can go into that if you like. We don't need to. But it would mean the likely resignation of the government, and if no new government can be formed that can command the confidence of the House, we'd then get a general election. It seems to me the political calculation here is to wait till the meaningful vote has happened, mm-hmm. and then lay the motion. Only caveat to that is if she looks like she's going to long out the period and wait right up until, you know, the last possible moment, you know, 28th of March, whatever. She has suggested she will definitely do it by January, but who knows? It's Theresa May.
She said she wouldn't cancel the vote at 11 a.m. and cancel it at 11:05.
Exactly. Exactly. So, you know, if it starts to look like she is really desperately avoiding it, then perhaps things change. But that's my reading of the situation.
So one theory I've heard, we're going to do quite a short show, by the way, today. So we're going to take questions in maybe about 5-10 minutes. But one theory I've heard today, or one suggestion, is that Labour should tomorrow call a vote of no confidence because the ERG know their chances of toppling May are done for 12 months, and the only way to get rid of her is via Parliament. So there might be some members of the ERG who vote for that motion.
But that
can you
remains
see
true
that
for
happening?
12 months. That remains true for 12 months. They can't be rid of her for 12 months. You know, that factor, it's not, you know, something...
I suppose momentum would be the argument, right? That she's
yeah, but
considerably weakened tonight.
But she'll continue to be weakened.
Yeah, she's not going to get much stronger anytime soon.
She will be even more weakened when she brings back an entirely cosmetic bit of shrugging from Brussels. So it doesn't seem rational to me to say that there is only this moment where one can strike. And I think, again, the question here isn't the ERG, because actually one doesn't know which way the ERG will vote, to be honest. I actually think, because Tories, you know, are relatively good at being stuck together by the glue of power, that they will probably vote for her in any confidence motion, even if it were laid tomorrow. So again, attention has to be with DUP there.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's... I can't see why any Tories would vote to bring down Theresa May, because if a general election happens, they can't find themselves in a better situation, can they?
The other situation in which one can imagine it happening is this effect that's been brought in by the Fixed Term Parliaments Act. So, if a motion under Section 23A of the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, which gives a very specifically worded form of motion, triggers the 14-day period, perhaps you could see some Tories voting to bring down May's government, but absolutely intent on voting in, you know, a government of some other complexion, Tory complexion, you know, within that 14-day period. There are lots of big kind of theoretical constitutional questions that arise then, because it's actually not clear, you know, what latitude the Prime Minister has in that situation, because of course conventionally the Prime Minister is supposed to either dissolve Parliament or resign on losing the confidence of the House. The Constitutional Convention is very clear: the government is the government and the Prime Minister is the Prime Minister only insofar as they command the confidence of the House. Once that is lost, you know, then it's unclear. Obviously the PM can't dissolve Parliament, you know, by their own prerogative, well, by the royal prerogative anymore, but it's, you know, it seems to me, and incidentally, it seems to the Commons Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee, which published a report yesterday on this. It seems to me that duty to resign still exists. So it's, you know, it's again unclear what would happen in that 14-day period, and whether, constitutionally speaking, in fact, you know, the Prime Minister should then, you know, hand over to the leader of the opposition to give him the opportunity to form a government in that 14-day period. So it is unclear, because a lot of people read it as if, you know, it's a 14-day grace period for the Prime Minister to do some tap dancing. Other people read it as, you know, there being still a constitutional duty to resign. You know, other people just want to claw their eyes out, and I sympathise with them.
We've got some great questions coming through. First of all, we're now on 1,100 people watching live, which is amazing. You've heard me say it before, you'll hear me say it again. Please like this show. Please click on subscribe so you always get a notification whenever we go live. Share this on your Twitter, on your Facebook. And of course, to make this show possible so that we can expand when a general election comes around, as it looks likely will happen soon, please go to support.novaramedia.com. As you know, our ask is for the equivalent of 1 hour's wage a month. If you already subscribe, thank you. You are what makes this possible. Okay, now we're going to go to your questions. Randomated. You always get a bonus point if you can explain their name. I don't know if this is that deep, to be honest. Randomated. Question: what are the chances that the Tory party will split because of this?
Low. The Tory party hasn't split since the Corn Laws in the 19th century. It's even less likely to do it when it's in power these days. It is, I suppose, possible. The only thing I would say is the thing that does really split the Tory party is Europe. Both Ted Heath and John Major in 1972 and 1993 both had to do the, effectively back me or sack me, this Major making Europe an issue of confidence. Maastricht, Ted Heath making European Communities Act an issue of confidence. So if it is likely to happen, it's likely to happen over this. I don't see it. Where are they going to go?
Well, I suppose the only thing they can do, so the only thing that's happened recently is if they defect to go to a party that looks like it has a chance of winning in their constituency. So you saw that with UKIP, right? Douglas Carswell and what was his name? Reckless.
Yeah.
Something Reckless. So if there were to become a sort of like outrider, I mean, UKIP have kind of fucked it because it's going to be difficult for Tories to go to this far-right Islamophobic street movement. I mean, they're always a bit Islamophobic, but
they
weren't
like
explicitly created to
some water between
sort of like the far-right mob.
Yeah. That's true. The question is where they're going to go.
I think if UKIP had gone down a different path, then potentially you could have seen a lot of defections, because UKIP could have boomed in the polls, and people who were in sort of deep leave constituencies could well see this as a sensible time to
I mean,
switch.
you might get one or two, possibly. I don't know, someone like Philip Hollowbone or something like that. But again,
I mean, the other thing that they should take into account is, so it's a bit different from the Labour backbenchers. So the Labour backbenchers know, I mean, again, it seems somewhat unlikely that they'll split, but they know that Corbyn has hegemony in the party and his wing of the party have hegemony for a long time. Whereas if you're a Tory backbencher, you know that May's days are numbered. There's going to be a leadership election soon, and the way you influence who wins that leadership election is you stay in the Conservative Party. So it'd be a pretty weird time to leave, to be honest. Michael Doyle, question to James. Are we seeing the strange death of the Tory party?
It's an interesting question, actually. Yeah, I think we are, but partly because of the nature of our political system, much like we saw the death of New Labour and a new party reborn in its shell, one can possibly see a similar situation here, but of course it's a very differently constituted party. So very famously, the Tories made more money last year out of dead people than it did living, so out of bequests in wills than it did from membership fees, which is great.
By the way, at Novara Media, we do welcome anyone including us in your will. Not that we'd ever wish upon you bad health or bad luck, but I think historically that's been one quite functional way of left-wing media organisations funding themselves, isn't it?
And small left-wing parties as well. The Socialist Party of Great Britain, largely funded by bequests. Communist Party continues to be funded by bequests and its successor organisations. Anyway.
So yeah, if you're thinking of writing a will, get in touch.
But yeah. So strange death of the Tory party. Yeah, I mean maybe
It's worth saying most of our money comes from people who are well and truly alive.
Yes.
It's the sign of a very relevant, flourishing organisation.
So I get maybe one of the things that's interesting here is to view it in kind of a wider context. So you have this kind of story about what happens to politics over the course of the 20th century, late 20th century, is the stuff that Peter Mayer writes about in Ruling the Void, and in which Europe plays a part, right? It's in which party elites withdraw from, and his study of this, by the way, was the Labour Party. The party elites withdraw from the people withdraw from the party. So you have these nominally representative structures in which there's very little representation, very little political contestation. He writes a book about it called Ruling the Void. Very, very good book. Super interesting that it seems to have changed as far as the Labour Party is concerned. But it does strike me that there's another or a new phase in that kind. So this was really describing technocracy, right? In which political decisions or political economic decisions are lifted out of their democratic decision-making structures. There does now seem to me to be a new phase in which there is a...
Nothing's going to fall down, I just hit something with my foot.
In which there is a kind of deep and corrosive anti-political attitude, I think especially on the right, in which... the sense of corruption is so generalised that it's hard to see how you get a political articulation of what is the dominant ideology on the right. So I'm thinking, the kind of YouTube conspiracy people, the Tommy Robinsons, the alt-right, but not just the alt-right, right? So also like that kind of weird,
which has taken over the Republican Party in the United States, so it's possible.
Yeah,
right?
it's absolutely possible, but I don't see how you get a political articulation of that within the Conservative Party. So the question, then is, I suppose the flip side of it is whether the vehicle is whether it's possible to take it over, and the answer is, eventually. I think that's possible. Aaron Banks 6 months ago or so was saying, people who want to defend Brexit should join the Conservative Party. It takes 3 months to get voting rights there.
While Sonia Soda, head leader writer at The Observer, is obsessed with Liberals joining the Conservative Party to try and bolster the Remainers within.
She really is awful, isn't she? I mean,
I don't know. I wasn't going to be mean, but
no, I mean just contentless. Like utterly disconnected from any sense of political relevance. With no grasp on why politics happens in the way it does. Not just her. Like, I mean, quite a lot of the commentariat. But it depresses.
She's still very welcome on the show, by the way.
Well, not while I'm here.
Right. In the event of a second referendum, which side do you think would win?
This is super, super interesting question. I actually see no reason to believe that the coordinates, as with the last referendum, have shifted so substantially. And again, as we said, it depends on the question. Mm-hmm. But let's just take those two. If it were a straight rerun of the last referendum, my sense, and it's important to know, I am a pessimist. My sense is that Leave would win again, because nothing substantial in the things that determined that election have changed. And unfortunately, it wasn't, Vladimir Putin with his, mind powers that changed that, or that swung that election. The Leave press is not going to do any different from what it did last time. It's going to call people traitors. It's going to call, the political class scum. Farage is going to wheel out those adverts. You're going to get all of this kind of endless cycle of press stories. The press will be as craven, as useless, as unintelligent as it was the last time. The campaigns may be slightly different, but it really looks like you'd get at the moment, a bunch of Twitter QCs, Tony Blair and, Andrew Adonis leading the Remain campaign, or at least being, frankly, probably the most prominent media voices of the Remain campaign. You have Alan Rusbridger saying, former editor of The Guardian, saying the other day on Twitter, if only we could go back 2 years ago when our country was, had unity. It's that kind of useless, incurious, incapable, unintelligent thinking that led to the feeling of disenfranchisement that powered that vote in the first place. It hasn't changed, and it would happen again. Now, there is a very different question about what the role of the Labour Party, about what the role of the left would be in that campaign. Obviously, now the left is in a stronger position in the party. There are questions about the way in which official campaigns would be conducted. There are really severe questions over what kind of policy would come. And I think we don't need to go into that, but I think it is an important and interesting question. So yeah, that's the only variable I think that has changed really substantially.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if we have a second referendum, it will be even more horrible than the first. Absolutely. I would not look forward to it at all, because you've got such a strong betrayal narrative. I think the only thing that could work in the favour of Remain is that last time around, one of the reasons the polls were wrong is because people that would sort of tend towards Remain didn't bother turning out, because it was such a... Well, most people were just convinced that Remain were going to win. It was a rather complacent campaign. So I think the fact that you now have a really passionate... Like, I've been on some of the People's Votes marches, not because I wanted people's vote, but just out of interest to see what's going on. And there is actual genuine energy there. So I think the fact that you will see a more dynamic and energetic ground campaign for Remain could increase turnout, even if it doesn't persuade many people.
Yeah, well, that's what,
But I mean, I wouldn't look forward to it, but I think it potentially will be an option.
It would be a
at this
fucking
point.
nightmare. I mean, that is the thing to say. So it would be. Do not kid yourselves. This would not be a happy clappy festival of Remain with everyone having seen the light, having been condescended to for the past 2 years. That is not what will happen. It will be ugly, and it will be difficult, and it will be horrifying. If we have to do it, we have to do it. But
right, I think we're going to do this as the last question, because I want this show to be No,
Punchy,
a tight
sure.
one. A tight one. Do Labour have more chance of winning an election with May as leader? That's from Ben Spill.
Okay. Interesting one.
I'd say probably yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean,
no,
she's a terrible
it's
leader for elections.
Yeah. Well,
the alternatives aren't particularly attractive.
No. I know. I mean, the other thing to say is that one of the reasons she fucked up so badly in the last election is that actually no one had really seen her campaign, and so didn't know actually how bad she was going to be. She didn't really campaign for a council seat when she was a councillor. Didn't safe seat in Maidenhead. Wasn't not prominent in the Remain campaign. Didn't have to fight for the Tory leadership, so that was her real testing ground. I don't think she will have improved. It's very clear from her statements in the past. Whenever anyone asks her an unexpected question, she sort of fritzes.
Yeah.
So great. She would make an excellent opponent. But the other runners and riders are also, actually pretty dire themselves. Liz Truss is bonkers. Sajid Javid is Sajid Javid wooed his wife by reading her Ayn Rand. Sajid Javid is weird. Michael Gove is Michael Gove. Amber Rudd has a majority of 364 seats.
I mean, I don't know the exact number, but something along those lines.
So it's not. I absolutely, if she wouldn't it be amazing if she led them into an election and lost her seat?
It's going to be very easy to run that campaign as well, especially as she's in work and pensions, very unpopular position. Also, I mean, there's loads of quotes where she said the reason she went to. Where is it?
Hastings.
Hastings is because she wanted to be in a commutable distance to London.
From London, and that people on benefits went down there because they could have a nice life by the seaside, friends and drugs.
Wow.
So yeah, nice woman. Who else is a possible runner and rider? Dominic Raab, Britannia Unchained lunatic. Jeremy
Hunt.
Jeremy Hunt
would probably be the most effective, even though
Jeremy
everyone
Hunt
associates him with privatising the
Prime
NHS.
Minister.
Or someone's outsider for PM is Justine Greening. I don't think she'd win.
Yeah, I'm not sure she'd find her way into leading the Tory party.
All right, let's leave it there.
There's
only so far that clairvoyancy can take you, isn't there?
I don't know. I stared deep into my crystal ball.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for watching at short notice. We want to keep these numbers going up. We want to keep... I mean, every time there is a big political event, and they're happening more and more often, we want a live show on Novara Media.
Yeah. I mean,
with the Novara team, we'll get some big guests in as well.
There's no way that this government is lasting till 2022.
Exactly. There is no way this government is lasting till 2022. And I mean, there's going to be a Brexit campaign as well. There might well be another referendum. Exciting times. The next 3 months are going to be... I was looking for what adjective. The adjective I could find was confusing. So that's going to be my pitch for why you should support .novaramedia.com. It's your support that makes this possible. Make sure you click subscribe on the YouTube channel so you get notifications every time we go live. As ever, thank you to Gary for his fabulous editing of the show. I think you saw one of his first graphics on this show as well. So our election graphic is really going to
pop.
Yeah, it's really going to pop off in the next few months. James Butler, you're always incredible. Thank you for being here tonight. This was an emergency Tisky Sour. We are Novara Media. See you on Monday.